was literally covered by mainstream press as the worst video game patch ever made.
Get ready.
Welcome, everyone. My guest today is, by any honest accounting, one of the most influential people who has ever worked in online games. And he's also one of the most generous thinkers this industry has ever produced. He co-founded Legend Mud in 1993 while finishing an MFA in creative writing. He was the creative lead on Ultima Online, the game that introduced persistent worlds to the mass market. He was also the original creative director on Star Wars Galaxies before SOE got involved. He founded Metaplace. He wrote A Theory of Fun for Game Design, which is taught in design programs on 6 continents, and also translated into 9 languages, and still selling at first edition pace. He wrote The Declaration of Rights of Avatars in 2000, which is now cited in legal scholarship on digital governance. And in 2018, he founded Playable Worlds to build the MMO he's been planning since the mid-1990s. That game is Star's Reach, and it's in active pre-alpha right now. His name is Raph Koster. Raph, welcome to Replay. Welcome, everyone. Raph, before we jump in, I just wanted to say, congratulations. I saw that today you announced your early access window for Star's Reach this morning. That seems like a big day to me, and we're definitely going to spend real time on the game on Star's Reach a little later in the show. But if it's okay with you, I would love to actually start somewhere else, because the thing I think a lot of people don't know about you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you didn't come into games from like tech or fandom. You came in from a creative writing MFA. So I thought that would be a really interesting place to start from.
Yeah, you have the story right. I did come in from a creative writing MFA. It actually goes back a little further than that. I did a double major in creative writing in English and in Spanish literature in undergrad, and also was one class shy of a major in music theory and composition, and one class shy of a minor in studio art. Ironically, even though I have technical patents and whatnot these days, I never studied programming. I got started doing that as a kid on my dad's CPM Osborne 1, and a little bit later on my own Atari 8-bit computer in the early 1980s.
So did it start as maybe just like a your career path, I guess, for lack of a better term? Did that start from just like tinkering around as a hobby? Like, I'm gonna, I've got access to this computer, I'm gonna just play with it and see where it goes?
Pretty much. I grew up overseas. My mother worked for UNICEF, and so I would fly back to the States over the summers to spend time with my dad. I would see the latest arcade games. Then I'd go back to Peru or Barbados or wherever that we were stationed at the time, and I would make board game versions of the arcade games, like Tabletop Pengo, Tabletop Cubert, and we would play them during recess in class in school. So that was my actual early game design training. I even sold one copy, but a group of us sold a game in a Ziploc baggie in the early 80s to classmates that we got up and running on the Atari and on the Commodore 64. So
it's amazing.
That's an early start.
I think that's going to date both of us, because I shared a very similar experience growing up, buying Ziploc baggie, 5 1/4, whatever the size were of those floppy disks, in Ziploc bags, for the Apple II Plus or whatever.
You probably, like me, bought a game by Lord British, who did the Ultima series.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then later, my first job in the industry, I'm working for him.
Yeah, we're going to get there. I definitely want to talk about that. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about the Legend Mud, that you co-founded in 1993. talk about that experience, the process of doing that. I believe, I was wondering in my head, like, I believe it used historical periods as its setting, I was
That's
wondering
right.
if that's sort of how your literary, experience got embedded inside a game world, that experience that you had.
Yeah, the theme of Legend Mud was history the way they thought it was.
Yeah.
And that meant that mythology was fair game.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
you actually could time travel. Still can. The game is still running, by
I
the way.
know. It's crazy.
Which, yeah, text-based online games are an alien world to most gamers these days. I
Yeah.
think most people don't know there's still quite a thriving scene there, or might not even be able to wrap their head around how do you play such a thing. But
Right.
it's still a thing. Think a cross between text adventures and
Go
an
north.
MMO, right? And
Yeah.
they are the primordial ancestors of today's MMOs.
Yeah.
Those games were actually more diverse than MMOs, and a theme like history was a bit unusual, but not that unusual
Yeah.
for what was going on in the Mud world at the time. Legend Mud was weird because it had that theme. We supported time travel, so you could be geographically in London and time travel to Roman Britain and then, wander offshore and get entangled with the Beowulf saga.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could be in London and wander off to Nottingham and get entangled with Robin Hood or Spencer's Fairy Queen. Or you could be in the industrial period and get entangled with, vampires in the Belfry and maybe catch a freighter all the way with the East India Company all the way off to the Bay of Bengal and Hong Kong. So, it was the literary side. We prided ourselves on very literary descriptions. We were an extremely quest-heavy game for Muds of the day. Like the Beowulf and the entire Ring of the Nibelungs was in there as a single connected quest. It was pretty formative in a lot of ways. It led to exploring gameplay beyond tank, nuker, healer. I am of this class. Let's party up, kill 10 rats, level up, get gear. Right.
Right.
That game was a standard Mud game, and I kind of burned out on it by 1996 personally, right? Of course, the rest of the world mostly didn't discover it for another decade or more, right?
Yeah.
But it was a very common mode of play back then. So Legend Mud intentionally tried breaking out of that. We had early forms of crafting, player housing. It was a classless Mud. You didn't have to be stuck in a single class. We had out-of-character lounges with events and live storytelling and guest speakers.
Right.
It really wanted to be more of a virtual world than just the game. Even though it was a pretty fun game, it's still a fun game.
Well, speaking of the live events and lecture series and live storytelling, what did that teach you about what an online space could be, versus what people just assumed it was?
Well, I mean, it taught me that first, even the terminology. Today we call these MMOs, which of course, as an acronym, just means massively multiplayer online blank. Because nobody wants to say MMORPG.
Right.
But of course, very quickly we got MMOFPS and MMORTS because once you have an online world, we shouldn't think of it as one game type. And I think that was one of the big lessons for me, was that virtual worlds were not a genre of game. Yeah. They were a place within which games could be put, right? And so we very early ran into questions, big, lofty questions, right? Like governance. We pioneered things like having codes of conduct for the admins, which was actually kind of weird at the time. The idea that admins might have ethical responsibilities towards the players was considered outre and weird and strange on our part. So yeah, I think from pretty early on, maybe it was the theme, maybe it was the other things that we'd put in the game. Legend Mud really pushed us towards thinking of virtual worlds as being much more than just the game. And, this was the mid 90s. We're talking full on snow crash, techno libertarian mania. We saw it as kind of a future for the internet.
Yeah.
And we weren't entirely wrong.
Nope. Yeah. I wanted to take a moment. You mentioned Ultima. You mentioned Richard Garriott, aka Lord British. I've heard the story that he logged into Legend Mud to evaluate you before hiring you for Ultima Online. Is that true?
It's true, and nobody believed it was him. They all made fun of him.
That's hilarious.
Well, I mean, why would you believe some rando shows up and goes on global chat? Greetings all, for I am Lord British. Why would anybody believe you?
Right. You're like
Picture that in a random Discord server.
Yeah, exactly. Did you know you were being interviewed? Or is that something that was prearranged, or did he just?
It was not prearranged. So there's a bit of a it's who you know kind of situation that happened there. The programmer who co-founded Legend Mud with us, Rick Delaschmidt, actually landed the job at Origin to work on an early version of what was then called Multima.
It's catchy.
That was the code name. Sometime in early 1995, possibly very late 1994, somewhere in that window. And he and a few others, like Star Long, Ken Demarest, Jim Greer, they actually built that Multima prototype. And then when time came to actually build a team around it, they asked Rick, who would you recommend? And he recommended my wife and I, who were two of the other, there were four co-founders of Legend Mud, and he recommended the two of us as designers. So we did a road trip. We were living in Alabama at the time, attending grad school. We did a road trip out to Austin. We interviewed in person, but we had no idea that they were going to log into Legend Mud and start exploring and checking it out and talking to random people. I wasn't online at the time that Richard did that. So
that's hilarious.
I found out later when I logged in and everyone was, did you hear about this? Was that real?
Did you once you got the offer, did you know what you were walking into at Origin?
Not entirely. They sent us a bunch of interview questions, and Kristen and I had already been working on designs for ways to integrate simulation much more into MMOs and not MMOs, MUDs, into MUDs and virtual worlds. So we had come up with this idea of using this abstracted property system that we called resources, because they were economic resources. Things like the, you could be able to chop down a tree and get some wood, and then you could use the wood to craft something else. We were saying you could drive all the AI off of that. And that was quite a design break from the way that MUDs were typically built, right? They were really handcrafted entries in a database, right? Yeah. A crafting recipe was item A plus item B. The idea that no, wood can turn into all these things was just strange, right? And so when they asked us these interview questions, they sent us a coding sample for a quest, and it was find the bug in the code sample. It was a programming test. And we found the bug. It was a missing parenthesis. And then we said, but this is a terrible quest design. You ought to do it this way with that generic resource system. They sent us an ask for how we would write quests, and we sent them Beowulf. said, well,
right.
here's the entire narrative of Beowulf, but we wouldn't do it that way anymore because it's very labor intensive. We show up for the first day at work, and we meet Mike McShaffrey, who is the lead programmer on Ultima 9. And we say, so what's the game? Because we are junior game designers, barely there, right? Our starting salary, I think, was $25K. And we assumed that, this is Origin. We create worlds. They must know what they're doing. And so we said, well, what's the game? And they said, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to have this abstracted property system so that quests are auto-generated. And we looked at each other and realized we had just been thrown in the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
The game was going to be designed around our job application.
Oh, crazy. That is so crazy.
Yeah. We were 23, 24, something like that.
And, it being the first time really, a persistent online world was, marketed and sold to at least the mass market. When you were building it, did you have any model for what success would look like? Or were you, inventing that metric as you went?
Electronic Arts, I've heard multiple numbers for this, right? But supposedly estimated lifetime sales for the game between 30 and 50,000 people ever. Oh, wow. That's what they thought, total copies that would sell.
That was their forecast.
We were not the only project that got going in that same time window. EverQuest, Asheron's Call, Tibia, over in Korea, Dark Ages, right? This was an inflection moment. And actually, most of us came to know each other very quickly during the mid-90s because there were so few of us working in the space at the time. We had commercial models that were on the closed online services, CompuServe and Genie and the like, that paid by the minute. But we were mud people, just all of us. And so we were children of the open internet. Yeah. We were people who used IRC and Usenet and Gopher and other obsolete things, and Telnet and whatnot. And so what ended up happening was that we weren't able to draw tons of things from the closed online services. It's a different business model, a different audience, a different approach. We were graphical in a way that some games were 2D graphical like we were. Meridian 59 was getting going. That one was Doom-style 3D graphics. Yeah. EverQuest would be full 3D hardware accelerated, but it was coming along later, right? It didn't come along until 99. So it was one of those moments. I always say we were a scene, right? Like in the artsy sense, like the scene around Warhol or the scene around Seattle grunge or whatever. Only we were a virtual scene, and we were all talking together on the Mud Dev mailing list, swapping ideas, quite outside the view of executives at any of these companies. We recommended friends to the other companies. Like I recommended Damien Schubert, who went on to work on Star Wars: The Old Republic and whatnot. He was one of the guys that we were building MUDs with, and I recommended him into Meridian 59. It was a moment where we all knew each other, we all helped each other, and honestly, we all knew that we were going to change the world. We very much had that sense at the time because we were in our early 20s and we were working on the cutting edge. But we had absolutely no sense of what our budgets were, what it meant to be a professional game designer, what the rest of the industry was like. We literally worked on a different floor of the building, which was under construction. The exterior walls had been knocked down, so you surfaced onto bare concrete out of an elevator and could walk off the building to your death.
Oh, God.
And we were in the only part of the floor that still had drywall around it. During the winter, it was so cold that we all came in wearing jackets and fingerless gloves so we could type, because our one test server sat directly under the thermostat and kept heating it, so the AC was blowing all winter and we were freezing.
Oh my God, unbelievable.
And we built the alpha of the game. My first day was September 1st, 1995. And we opened the alpha in time for E3 of 1996.
That's insane.
So
That's
6 months later,
Yeah.
we ran the alpha test.
Yeah.
And we had to resort to posting on a fledgling webpage. Legend has it, the first webpage anybody in EA had ever launched, with a giant FAQ about what the game was going to be, all of our dreams. And we said, we can't afford to send out CDs. So send us $5 so that we can afford to print a CD and send it to you so that you can join this test. And 50,000 people sent us money right then. And EA went, wait a minute.
You guys just invented the pre-order.
We kind of, it wasn't even a pre-order. We kind of invented like paid early access or something, right? It was the first of many things we would invent on Ultima Online. I think the game today, it's over 25 years old, and I think its influence is so pervasive today that people do not realize how much of what we play in games today comes from Ultima Online.
Yeah. Also, clearly there was chaos during the development time, but it seems like even the early days, after it was launched, was chaotic in ways that, have now become legendary, between player killers, the ecology collapse, the assassination of Lord British. I'm just curious, was there a moment where you thought, this is exactly what we built for, or rather than this is going terribly wrong?
It was both at the same time. One of my favorite stories about it is actually none of the famous ones, right?
Yeah.
The famous ones have been told in many videos. I think your listeners can find, lots of material about all of them. Richard forgot to set his invulnerability flag, so he got murdered by a random killer, a thief, actually. The player killing problem, which we fought endlessly trying to solve the problem of how do we provide the freedom without essentially making it so that every single dispute comes to us to get resolved,
right.
Which is a problem that I often say, I wish we had actually kept working on it. We gave up eventually. I wish we had kept working on it, because today it still feels like the biggest problem on the internet. And we didn't manage to really crack it back then when it was more controlled. Yeah. Oh well.
Right.
Now my favorite story is actually players banded together and started a war, and they besieged one of the cities in the game. And the way they did it was by building furniture. They built loads and loads of furniture and barricaded all the exits from this walled city called Trinsic. And we're watching this happen, and the players who load into that city are like, I can't get out. If I go out, they've left one gate open, and it's tiny and narrow, and if I go out that way, I got walloped on the back of the head immediately, and all my stuff is taken, right? And so we were facing this player management problem. And the answer we came up with was to make it so that axes could chop furniture. Rather than constraining what people could do, expanding the simulation so that people could do more. And the result of that was that the citizens of the town, the people logging in there, banded together, chopped their way out through, and won. They won the war.
It's amazing.
To me, those kinds of lessons about the emergent gameplay, that stuff sticks more than any static quest that you might do 50 times. But it's also incredibly hard to balance. It's a very challenging balancing act. And that kind of, how to put it, tension between the amazing power and freedom of emergence versus the danger of grief play and all of that.
Yeah.
Griefer, a term that came from UO, right? Along with many others. That tension, to my mind, is still in many ways the defining challenge of online spaces in general, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it feels like, talking about like the freedom, putting that freedom in players' hands. I know, you've spent your career sort of like fighting against that level design pattern. And Ultima Online absolutely had, skills-based progression, specifically to push against that. I'm just curious, from your perspective, has the industry learned that lesson? Are we still doing levels?
Levels are easy from a business point of view,
Yeah.
and the math from the design point of view is well understood. And from a consumer point of view, they're a very clear carrot, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very accessible. You tell them,
Yeah.
hey, go acquire XP and do this. But levels were pulled from Dungeons and Dragons,
Yep.
right? And um, in your typical D&D session, you don't actually play with people of different levels. You play with a group of people who are all clustered really tightly around the same level, and you all move through the levels together, which right off the bat makes it odd for a world where you're going to have all the levels interacting together at once. And so a lot of the history of MMO design has been putting in hacks to undo levels. You look at sidekicking, mentoring, world phasing. I forget, there's so many terms for this.
Yeah.
I forget what Guild Wars calls it when they level scaling, I think.
It sounds
Or is
about
that
right.
ESO? I don't know.
Yeah.
They're all ways of squishing everybody back down into a narrow level band again so that they can play together. Because otherwise you get out leveling one another. You have a huge problem around content consumption and moving through all the zones of the game, and then 90% of your content ends up obsolete. And, there's all these problems that are real challenges, not just for developers, but for players too.
Mm.
But for me, the big thing is actually that going with the standard leveling, you level because you get experience points. In D&D, the game master can give you XP for anything, right? And a good game master does give you XP for anything.
Yeah.
But a computer needs an event. It can't tell that you are a great guild leader. It can't tell that you are a really fascinating role player. It can't tell all these things that are crucial to how players enjoy MMOs, right?
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
it all gets reduced down to you killed something, you popped a bubble of XP. And what that then does is think about great D&D sessions. They're only a fraction of them is spent killing the monsters, right? So if you want that sense of being immersed in a world, that time where the bard is playing their instrument, that time where you're role playing in the tavern, that time where you're haggling with the merchant to buy stuff, all of those things are valuable, important parts of feeling immersed in this alternate world. Just making the games about fighting, to me, always felt hugely reductionist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're cutting most of human experience.
Yeah.
And so the reason to go classless or to look for other ways to progress in these games is to allow more ways to play, more ways to experience the environment, more ways to interact with other people, rather than saying that the only way you can interact is at the point of a gun, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to make sure we cover off on a couple of things. So before we move to the next topic, I'm curious, in relation to what we're talking about and having 30 years distance between when you were working on Ultima Online. I'm curious, what does it look like from you now, like to you now? Do you go back and play it? Do you see things
No.
that weren't visible to you when you were making the game?
Sure. I mean, to me today, it feels janky and clunky and primitive and all of that because it's the game from that long ago.
Sure.
I don't tend to go back and play my worlds, right?
Yeah.
I don't go back and play Legend Mud either, or Galaxies, or But what I see is, despite the kind of eventual dominance of the WoW gameplay model, what I see is entire game genres built around decorating houses, which UO had years before The Sims, right? Popped up during the beta in 1996, where it's an expectation that you can go fishing, right? Which was pretty much not a thing until UO. Where, and I apologize to everybody in gaming, where even Uncharted and Tomb Raider and God of War make you go craft things now. That's probably my fault, right? Because, there wasn't crafting like that until Ultima Online came around. I could go on, even customizing your avatar that way. So I look around today, and what I see is Minecraft and Animal Crossing and the entire survival crafting genre, and but also things like DayZ and Rust, which took away the lessons of the PKing and made it the point, right? Today I look back and I go, those are all children of what we did early on with sandbox MMOs.
Yeah, you planted a lot of seeds that certainly took root.
My preferred metaphor is that we made Ultima Online, it was a puddle. And then World of Warcraft came along, went splat. But the droplets, they went everywhere.
It's crazy. Well, I know you mentioned Galaxies, and I think that might be a good segue if you're willing. After Ultima Online, you moved to SOE and became the creative director on Star Wars Galaxies, which, I don't say this lightly, I feel it's one of the most ambitious games ever attempted. And I'm curious, when you were designing it, what was the thing that you were most certain was right that the market might not be ready for at the time?
It's hard to pick one thing.
I
think I would pick, we used procedurality a lot for building the maps and having dynamic environments, which was something that we wanted and the design of UO wanted, but we didn't really have the tech to be able to do in the 90s. But in the early 2000s, we could. And so, we shipped, I forget how many planets it was, like a dozen planets. It would have been I think 4 gigabytes worth of map space, which was a very large map for that time period at the level of detail that we did it, and was too big to actually ship on CDs at the time. And DVD drives were not common enough that you could ship DVDs. So today, of course, we have like a No Man's Sky or something, and that sounds like small potatoes. But, that was one of the things that we kind of saw coming and said, hey, if you do this, you can also make it modifiable. Players can actually change it. I think that was one of the things. I think the dynamic economy that we built in Galaxies was ahead of its time. And I think Eve was very much a fellow traveler at that time.
Yeah.
They were out there saying, let's make UO in space kind of a vibe. And the one that I think that didn't get picked up on nearly as much was the player cities. And I think that's still something underdeveloped in games out there today. That sense of players collaborating to work on even larger scale things, and taking on some of those admin problems themselves, right? In a weird way, and this analogy might make more sense later when we talk about Star's Reach, but when we think about how Discord or Reddit work today, where you've got this big connected social environment, but you devolve control of pieces of it, right? That's their server, that's their subreddit, and they have control within there. Galaxy's player cities were an attempt to do that, to help solve the problems that we ran into in Ultima Online. It was a way to say, no, players could be mods of an area, and then it's their problem, and they get to make decisions about what they want that environment to be like. It ends up feeling like the much of social media is UO, and Discord and Reddit feel like Galaxy cities to me in a weird way.
Yeah, and I know this is like a small example for me, but I remember at the time, like there was an entertainer class, which was
Yes.
like, a viable supported profession in a Star Wars game. That was the first, if I can recall. You could be a musician or a dancer, and it really mattered to the ecosystem. Um,
Yep. I
Walk me through that design logic.
well, I mean, again, you have to go back to UO and the desire to uh, capture many playstyles and support them and reward them in the game. Um, on many MUDs, you might have a bardic class, but it was used for taunts and combat, right?
Right.
Not actually being a musician, right? Like it always felt off to me. Like, sure, you can be a musician, but the music is the least important part, right? Like that isn't
Yeah.
it's a skin put on top of taunting and aggro management. Um, so I'm a musician. I play a bunch of instruments. I compose and write music, and so it never sat right with me. And
Mhm.
so, but that was true of many of the other things as well, right?
Yeah.
Doing music and allowing people to build music was challenging. I was thrilled when Lord of the Rings Online actually finally broke the barrier, which was a legal barrier that LucasArts and Sony wouldn't
Mm,
let us cross,
that
which
makes
was
sense.
allowing players to just enter musical notes and play. I was disallowed from doing that. I tried to make it happen and I wasn't allowed to. But in a weird way, if on UO we got made fun of by everybody for having baking bread be like a profession, a way to play, in Galaxies we got fun of for having dancing.
Mm.
But that isn't one where I go, oh, the market didn't get it. Because today, Fortnite makes all of its money off of
Um, that's actually right.
that.
Yeah.
Dancing is the argument that I won.
Yeah. Well done. Good job to
Right?
you,
Like,
sir.
yeah, that one's
Yeah.
everywhere now. And we take it for granted that, of course, dancing is a thing. Um, yeah, the social dimension of it is a viable playstyle in its own right. Um, in the more experimental time periods of the early 2000s and the early 2010s, there were even MMOs entirely about dancing. There was one called Audition that was quite popular that came out of Korea. Um, I think it goes to show that a lot of the sandbox gameplay features have actually a much broader appeal
Hmm.
than slaying 10 orcs does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but they ended up flowering when they were outside of MMOs more than when they were inside an MMO.
Yeah. And then, on the other side of that, you had Jedi's, right, as an alpha class that pretty much breaks any multiplayer system they touch.
Yes.
And you saw that from the start of Star Wars Galaxies. I'm curious what the conversation inside the team was about that problem. And, how did you guys try to solve it?
Yeah. So some of this is tied up with the complicated development history of Galaxies.
Yeah.
When Rich Vogel and I were told by Sony Online, hey, we want you to take over this project that is already ongoing,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Galaxies had already had like a year plus of time. It wasn't called Galaxies at the time. It was called Star Wars Online. And it was being developed out of San Diego.
mm,
And when they brought in us and our team that had been working on Privateer Online at Origin, but that was canceled, um, we essentially were handed the team. Development suddenly became split between the two locations. A bunch of people were very upset, rightfully so, in my opinion, and quit over it. It was a challenging moment. It meant that we ended up with a bunch of decisions that had been negotiated with LucasArts in advance, among them the time period for the game. It was set in between Star Wars, which I'll call, for the sake of everybody younger than us, Episode 4, A New Hope.
right.
But it was set in between Episode 4 and Empire Strikes Back. that is a time period in which there are no Jedi running around, right? Like all this hunt is going on to find Obi-Wan and to find, nobody knows about Luke Skywalker and so on. Bounty hunters get sent after you. In the EU, there were Force sensitives cropping up here and there, but it was not a moment where there were Jedi all over the place, right? And so from the beginning, we had this challenge of, well, the canon says this shouldn't be around, right? And the easy game design solution would be don't have them, make them NPCs. Yeah. But when we floated that, the response is, but it's the ultimate fantasy. Everybody wants to be a Jedi. So that got ruled out. Then you have the next side of it, which was actually the choice that the prior dev team had chosen, which was then don't make it an alpha class, just make it a starting class. And we looked at that and we went, but that means that a level 50 Jedi or whatever we do is going to be the same as a level 50 whatever. Like they're not going to be special in any way. And the response to that was, no, that can't be right. A Jedi needs to be able to like mow their way through enemies. And and so they had to be rare, super powerful, and anybody needed to be able to be one. Impossible dilemma.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I floated the idea of how about we make it a hardcore mode. Diablo was out, of course, by then, and it had a hardcore mode, which had essentially permanent death on your character. Permadeath was something that had been tried in many mods, but wasn't all that popular. But having it as a mode was kind of interesting, and I hadn't really seen that before. I'm sure it existed. But the idea was if you managed to unlock Jedi, you could get a Force-sensitive slot, but that slot would be in hardcore mode. And a timer would start running, and you would play, and if you used your powers publicly, we'd start sending, we'd send Bosk after you, then IG-88, then Boba Fett, then Mara Jade, and eventually Darth Vader. And Darth would just kill you, right? Like, you can't win. Yeah. And so you would aim for a high score based on how long you lived. It was a mode, right? It was a survival mode, hardcore survival mode. And as a reward for your other characters, you could end up with a blue glowy of your deceased Jedi, right? That you could summon at will, right? For bragging rights. I still really like that idea. And we did talk about it with players, but there was eventually, oh no, permadeath. We can't really do that. And the idea got watered down and then removed eventually. I believe there are Galaxies emulators that have actually implemented the system as it was originally intended. Yeah. But I've never actually played one. The tragedy of Jedi is that then marketing said, well, we need them in the game. We'd come up with a way that wasn't random, but was it relied on hidden information, which any cryptographer will tell you is the worst form of security. Marketing insisted that there be Jedi by Christmas and that we needed to drop hints. Once the hints started dropping, players figured out the algorithm to become a Jedi. And it broke the game completely.
Yep. Wow. Well, here's a topic that we do not have to talk about. I'm going to leave it up to you. I know you left SOE in 2006 before the new game experience, and you've been clear about that timeline. When you look at, go ahead.
It was actually after the NGE, the new game experience. But I had been moved off the project and told not to interact with the team because they needed to find their own way.
Interesting. Yeah.
I thought the NGE was a really, really bad idea.
Yeah, I just want your read on what went wrong at a design level, not even like the business side or anything. I'm just, from a pure design perspective.
So the motivations were business driven. Right?
Sure.
The motivations were we should have a larger audience. We have this huge IP. Much afterwards, I actually dug into that and I did research and I found that IPs that come from outside games we actually should not set any expectations on how well they do. They have a very checkered
Clearly.
history.
Yeah.
Homegrown IP in games is proven to be a great accelerant. But I mean, even back then, there was a history of Star Wars games that didn't do anything special in the market. So the expectations were probably out of whack for what having Star Wars should have meant. But World of Warcraft had hit. There was all this desire to casualize, to bring in a larger audience, and so on, which I understand, right? That there had been a big investment. The design decision was to make the game more action-based, and that was a challenge because the networking and the code and all of that had not been designed to do that. So there was a bit of a retrofit to make that happen, and it definitely felt clunky for quite a while. But I think more importantly is the community lesson, which is you had a passionate audience that had come in and adored the game the way it was. They were sticking with it through thick and thin because of what it offered. Yeah. And to them, it felt like a betrayal to change the game to such a degree. Yeah. I mean, it's been called the most infamous patch in all of video game history.
Absolutely.
And I don't say that lightly. Yeah. We're talking about a video game patch that made the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, right? Like, this was literally covered by mainstream press as the worst video game patch ever made. And so many of the design choices made to make it a broad appeal game were actually trimming away the sandbox bits. You could no longer be the entertainer who didn't fight. You could no longer keep all of those pets. In one of the great optics mistakes ever, they didn't delete everybody's pets. They left them in the inventory. You could just never take them out. They were trapped in amber. People held funerals for them. It was it stands today as an object lesson in if you build a community that is there for a particular idea, a particular ethos, a particular experience, that can evolve over time in collaboration with that audience. But you should never just rug pull and change the experience wholesale out from under people.
Yeah. Don't bite the hand that feeds you.
That's right.
Oh. We don't need to dwell on that. I wanted to actually talk a little bit before we jump into Stars Reach. I want to talk about your book.
Which
Theory
one?
of Fun.
Theory of Fun.
Yeah.
Sure.
Came out 20 plus years ago. Right?
25 years ago.
Yeah, it's taught, I know it's taught in game design programs worldwide. It's translated in 9 languages. I think you've described it as literally half cartoons.
It is half cartoons.
Did you know, though, that you were writing that book when you were writing it, or did it become that later?
So the origin of that book is as a talk, which is why it's half cartoons. I was asked to keynote the very first edition of the Austin Games Conference, which became GDC Austin. And it was me and I think Mark Jacobs was the other person. And we, I had been talking with some friends. I'd been talking with Noah Falstein, who worked on Sinistar and other games like that, and at LucasArts Adventures. And I'd been talking with Mud friends like Dave Rickey and others, and about the evolutionary things that led to playing games. Why do we play games? So I did a talk about that, and I didn't have a lot of time to put together the slides, so I literally drew cartoons in MS Paint or something for my slides, and used Comic Sans as the font, and that was the original. It was the original keynote, and the keynote went a little bit, viral for 2003 or whatever it was, and it was actually folks, academics, and a book editor, Ben Sawyer and a few others. Kurt Squire, I think, was the one who pointed out to Ben, and then Ben got the book idea and approached me actually at E3 and cornered me and said, I think you have a book. I think we can make a cool, like, little, it was meant to be little 50-page thing with a few statements and a cartoon, and it can be an inspirational little coffee table book. And he talked me into it, and by the time I was done, it was more like a 250-page thing with cartoons, and a lot of academic citations and all of that, and published it, and it was very controversial. Because it basically, the core thesis is that games are important because fun is learning.
Yeah.
Fun is the way in which we learn when there is no pressure. Right. And it's key to how mammals and other animal types and humans learn. And that thesis was controversial. And, a lot of, no, that narrows fun down too much and so on. And then the book promptly fell out of print because the publisher folded, but started going on eBay for hundreds of dollars. And more and more people were reading it, and O'Reilly ended up acquiring the folded publisher and resurrecting the book. And the book sells as many copies last year as it did every year since it came out. Literally, if you start a game design job in South Korea, there might be a copy waiting for you at your desk on your first day.
Amazing.
So it's gone on to have an outsized influence. It's still controversial, but a lot of what I said in the book has been more and more validated by science.
Yeah.
Right. Theories like predictive processing and so on. It was a book that drew heavily from cognitive psychology, and quite a lot of the things that were my theory of fun have gotten validated since then. And so it's had this fascinating life where it went from game designers to educators and now to AI researchers. AI researchers use the ideas in it as ways to tune game playing AIs and train AIs.
Would you make that same core argument today? Like, the fact that fun's about the mastery of problems and, that boredom is what happens when there's nothing left to learn. 25 years later, is that still a claim that you would make and adhere to? Because I know, yeah, but a lot of people, I would just say really quickly that a lot of people, and this may be my wrong hypothesis, some things they love about games right now is maybe comfort and repetition, which can be the opposite of challenge. So I'm just curious. Not that I'm challenging you, but
no.
Yeah.
I have two different responses there. One is there's nothing wrong with playing for comfort, but we can call it comfort. We don't have to call it fun. And the other is people usually define problems really narrowly. Right? Like, I love narrative games. Narrative games are presenting problems, but they are just a different kind of problem than estimating the trajectory of a bullet. They're presenting psychological problems, social problems, the same kinds of things we study in literature class. So I always meant problem pretty broadly.
Yeah.
To my mind, playing a multiplayer game, you are solving the problem of how other people think. If you are playing a narrative game, you're solving the problem of how the author thinks and how you think about the story they're presenting and what lessons you draw from it. And yeah, if you're playing an action game, you're solving reflex problems and math problems, right? All of those are forms of learning, and they're all super important. In fact, what the latest research on play says is that the biggest skills that, kittens and whatnot learned, and dolphins and so on, the biggest lessons there that people learn from play are not actually the math ones and so on. They're actually about getting along. That is the core thing that games actually trigger and help develop. Like when they take lion cubs and they raise them away from others, what they end up being unable to do is thrive in a pack or a pride. And that carries through, right? Like humans who, I mean, think about what we encourage kids to go learn to do. Please go learn how to play on a team, learn how to share, learn how to take turns, learn, right? That, this is another reason I often say games at their heart are really multiplayer, not single player, even though the prevailing current in digital has been single player for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. We clearly need more of that in this world. What was, you said it's controversial. I'm sure there are plenty of critiques. Like, what is there one most fair critique that you've heard from someone who's genuinely engaged with the book?
The one you raised is actually one of the best, right? What about all the ways to play that are not learning? I dug into that a bunch when I did a second edition, right? Like there's a really interesting overlap between playing a game that you've mastered, that you know really well, right? I remember for me as a kid, the first experience of this was playing an Atari game that I got so good at that I could literally close my eyes and kill screen the game.
Which one?
It was Laser Blast by Activision, and it took you had to play. Yeah, I had that to the point where I could just do this with my eyes shut, and it took like 4 or 5 hours to kill screen that game, and I could do it with my eyes closed, and that I don't know if I would call that fun, but it was profoundly meditative, and so I actually did spend time looking into that, and if you look at meditation practices around the world, they are about paying focused attention to a repeated pattern that you do over and over again until it becomes second nature and your mind goes clear. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's Laser Blast.
You've reached the Zen state.
Exactly. And so, the idea that you can go back to a game for comfort or to use it as meditation actually slots in perfectly. But I think as a designer, I want to know, am I designing this moment for meditation or am I designing this moment for learning? Because I'm going to shape the interaction differently, right? And whenever I talk design theory, I'm always coming at it from a craft point of view. These are not hypothetical, academic, artsy-fartsy things. They are all about how do I make games better? What is a tool I can put on my workbench? And the idea that if I want to sustain engagement in the game in a fun way, I need to keep presenting novel problems and unveiling new strategies and tactics. That is a tool on the workbench. Saying at the same time, I really enjoy the creativity of rearranging furniture, and it's very meditative. Well, I don't know that I would necessarily call that the same kind of fun. It's a different thing, right? There might be problems in like, the couch doesn't fit. Now it's a math problem again. And then I'll feel classic fun when I solve that. But if it's really about the aesthetics and it starts moving away from problem and into other realms sometimes. And I pick up different tools from the design workbench for that, right? Yeah. So that to me is the impetus behind all the, theory stuff I do, is how do I add more tools, not just for myself, but for everybody, right? For other game designers that help us think about how we craft what we make, and how we can better hit the targets we're aiming at, I guess, is how I put it.
Yeah. I've read or heard that, you would like to have some follow-ups, some sequels to those books or to that book. Is that something actively you're you're thinking about or thinking of doing or even doing in the background? Or is time such a precious commodity of which I'm sure you have very little, that is not something that you're in the, it's on your plate at the moment?
I have the outline for the sequel and have had been working on it off and on for 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's called a grammar for games, or a grammar of gameplay. It's I've had variations there, but it's basically going the next step deeper, right?
Yeah.
How do game systems work? How do they fit together? How do they elicit emotion? How do they elicit learning? Are there problem types that we can go to that reliably give us things, right? And actually, I have given dozens of talks and done research projects and so on around that subject. And a lot of that stuff has filtered its way into game design curricula over the years that various people have picked up on. I've had fellow travelers like Dan Cook, the late Mike Sellers, Stefan Bura, many others, Joris Dormans, who've been working kind of in that same area. And but I still haven't finished the book. There's a ghost listing on Amazon for it, but don't hit buy. And I've actually even outlined the one that comes after that.
That's amazing.
But finding the time to do it while actively working on games is challenging.
Yeah. Well, speaking of working on games, let's talk about Stars Reach. You've called Stars Reach the game I've wanted to make for nearly 30 years. And that is definitely not a marketing line. That's a 30-year through line from, Legend Mud to current to right now. What specifically couldn't you do in, you or Star Wars Galaxies that you're doing in Stars Reach?
Quite a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest is that we now have the compute to do the kinds of simulation things we were gesturing at in those games that we just didn't have before. Like, my Apple Watch is more powerful than the servers that ran Ultima Online by a lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot. You could run an MMO on your watch these days. And what's happened, famous software quote, software is a gas, it expands to fill the computer. What's happened is that for a variety of reasons, many of them just business pressures, we've ended up mostly making the same game over and over again. That's old, still, classic. It's not that it's a bad game, but hey, I am one of N classes and one of N player races, and I group up with the other classes, and we go slay monsters, and we get XP, and we get gear, and I collect gear sets, and then I go on a raid, and I solve a puzzle with a group. Like, that game is old.
Yeah.
That is Deku Mud from 1991, roughly. And I'm personally, as a player, burned out on it, but it also feels like it's time for MMOs to rediscover their potential, right? We, in a post-Minecraft world, in a post-Eve world, in a post, pick your poison, your Dwarf Fortress world.
Yeah.
How is it that our biggest, most ambitious alternate realities boil down to that? Like, it feels like not fulfilling the potential, right? So the parts that I've dreamed about for 30 years are not just, hey, we can actually simulate a world where you chop the tree and the tree goes over and all of the rest, but where the musician has a role, but also where the grass grows, where the seasons matter, where water flows, humidity, where you can irrigate the desert, tunnel through a mountain, burn down a forest and watch it grow back, where the dragon might land in a clearing in the forest and the forest catches fire. Like, the worlds can be responsive. They don't need to be static, handcrafted sets that are gorgeous, but they're like stage sets, right? They're actually cardboard the minute you go around behind them and you realize they're flat optical illusions. we now have the compute power thanks to cloud compute. We now have the technology to have worlds that react to players, that are living their own life, that the world itself is alive. The players therefore can't predict and wikify everything in them. And that open up gameplay for players that has just outright not been possible, right? Because, if we build games that are all about static stage sets, that's not really meant for the audience to come up on the stage and rearrange and take control. Yeah. But these are alternate worlds. That's what they're for, is for you to log in and jump on the stage, right? And so that is what Stars Reach fundamentally is about. We want to go back to some of the ideas of the sandbox, but also modernize, draw in all the lessons that went out to all those other games. All those lessons, from whether it's Animal Crossing or Dwarf Fortress or The Sims or wherever all those casual droplets went. Let's bring them back into MMOs, because they went on to become the foundation of entire genres of game, and really showed that there's a lot of people want to play doing more than just killing 10 rats, right?
Right.
So yeah, Stars Reach is about bringing back that sense of possibility, that sense of the magic of stepping into a world where you don't quite know what's going to happen.
For someone who has never played an MMO, I'm curious, what does it feel like to log into Stars Reach for the first time? What's the first hour like?
So in the first hour, you are told that long ago, humanity really started destroying all of their homeworlds, right? Whether it be global pandemics, who would have thunk it, or climate change, or peak oil, or you name it. The different human civilizations out there, we're all doing what we do, which is wreck things often, right? Because we can't work together or whatever. And it turns out that our whole arm of the galaxy was terraformed by an alien, incredibly powerful, ancient alien species. They're long gone. We just call them the old ones. We don't know that much about them. They terraformed the galaxy. They actually made us. They genetically uplifted us and all the animals and so on. So there is a whole arm of the galaxy that's perfect for us. But now, there we were in our coops dying off. Well, they had left behind these robot servitors, robot servants that were tending the garden. And the robots say, well, we're not allowed to let you die off. So they have let us out. And now we've formed the Transplanetary League to go adventuring. So you actually wake up as a brand new immigrant into the garden. You show up at a Transplanetary League base on a moon called Haven, waking up after having been brought all these light years from where you came, and you were turned into goo along the way. So, they say, well, we don't quite know what you look like, but why don't you redesign yourself? Nobody will know. So if you want to make yourself prettier, go for it. And that's kind of our excuse for character customization. It sets you on your path, right? And you come out, and the moon of Haven is in danger because some of those experiments are actually, that the old ones left behind, are quite dangerous. They left behind a planet-eating goo hive mind called the cornucopia that drops spores as meteors onto planets and infects them to swallow them up into sort of a biological Borg. You're not quite sure if you can trust the servitors because they seem friendly, but they also say things like, please don't disobey any of our rules, or we might take you for molecular disassembly, which does not sound very pleasant, honestly. So you show up in that world, and the TPL gives you your starter blaster, your starter spaceship, trains you in any of a number of professions that you could get going in. They say you might want to map a planet. Try mapping Haven, or you might want to go hunting for meat for the chef, or you might want to go gather up loot so you can sell it. A variety of activities. Go mining, go find us rare crystals at the bottom of a cave. So you try those out and you decide which ones you want to do. Because the game doesn't force you to do any one of them. You can choose. You could do all of them if you want. It is a classless game system. Then, once you kind of learn the ropes on Haven and the deadly planet that it orbits. Haven was a moon, remember. There's an unstable world called Crucible. Lots of lava. Don't fall in. Even getting close to it, you will catch fire, actually.
Because it's hot. It's lava. It has
It's hot.
physics.
That's right. That's right. Then you can venture out into the larger galaxy. And that galaxy is as many planets as we need for the players we've got, because we do generate them. We create wormholes. We open up new worlds on the far side. Players can go explore them, kill monsters and gather loot and tunnel and dig and burn down forests, all of that, and bring the stuff back to home. Or they can move in and build buildings and establish settlements and even elect a mayor and say, no, this is our place now. Here are the people who are allowed to build here. Here are the laws. What sort of PvP is allowed here? Who has permission to build, to dig? All of that. And so that's where I call back to the Discord server or the subreddit or the private server that you might run for Valheim or whatever, because all those planets still exist in one MMO galaxy. You can visit them all, fly through space, explore wherever you like, but you and your guild, you and your friends can own one of them and make it yours, and you can trade and exchange with those on the other planets. But it is one connected galaxy, not a whole bunch of separate shards or, I log into server X or whatever.
Yeah.
One connected, fully persistent galaxy. You dig a hole, it's there forever. You drive creatures extinct on a planet, they're gone. You might revive them if you got enough genetic samples before driving them extinct. And if you abandon a world, the wormhole to it might collapse. It might be lost. And that's okay, because we can always discover new ones.
Sweet. Sounds fantastic. And super ambitious.
I didn't even mention the craziest part, which is everything that you see, every tree grew there. Trees actually go from sapling to maturity and then die. Every rock, every cubic meter of the world is modifiable, mineable, deformable. The rivers can be rerouted. Water flows. When it flows over the dirt, it washes it away. You end up with a gravel riverbed. Reroute it through the desert will bloom and plants will begin to grow. Everything is simulated. Every cubic meter of the entire game, even in space.
Yeah.
All of it is simulated, modifiable. You can come to a virgin planet, chop all the trees down, kill all the monsters, pave it over, and build a shopping mall.
That's crazy.
You can do that.
And I know the architecture story has gotten much sharper publicly. You're talking, you have a single global server, right? You were talking about no resets, partly cloud native. For someone has shipped on the architecture of like the 1990s and 2000s, what does it actually mean to design content for a world that doesn't reset? Like,
yeah, it's definitely different, right? You do rely more on procedurality. You do have to shift your emphasis in the same way that all designers of simulation games do, right? Like when the Adams guys are working on Dwarf Fortress, they don't think in terms of what story can we tell, right? They have to think in terms of what stories can emerge and what stories can players tell. When Brian Buckley's working on Caves of Cud, same idea, right? Like it shifts how you think about the systems you design so that you aim for emergence. You can have set pieces that you're salting in there, but it isn't a game about the story you're telling. It's a game about the story that players are discovering and telling themselves.
Yeah.
So when you create the content, you think of creating content that is reusable, that is parametric. So that means that you define the bounds for it, but it can be very different depending on the situation in which you find it. So that it isn't just the same little set piece over and over again. The set piece feels like it organically belongs there because it adapts to the environment in which it was spawned. The big thing that changes everything, right? This would not work if we couldn't generate zones on the fly and throw them away.
Yeah.
And it sometimes feels like that's one of the things that is hardest to wrap your head around. We're used to MMOs having a map that grows, but not one that changes, right? So the idea that no, even the map itself is an organic entity is odd, right? Like you might come back to the game and go, oh wow, I really miss this place. And it's like going back to the city you moved away from 10 years ago. It might be completely different, or maybe it's gone, right? And you have that moment of, oh wow, this is a continuous tapestry. Yeah, if it weren't for the confluence of cloud, right? We run the AI for doing this in the cloud. It's cellular automata AI, not Gen AI, right? We run that in the cloud. If it weren't for the confluence of that, the ability to stream the data, video cards and computers getting good enough for us to take that data and build the entire environment on the fly around you, because that's what we end up doing. We construct the meshes for everything around you, right? The terrain and all of that has to be built on the fly because it can change on the fly.
Yeah.
The tech to do this just wasn't there, right?
No, clearly.
Now, we do borrow technical ideas. I did a project called MetaPlace back in the late 2000s that ended up being the back end for Club Penguin. It ended up being part of Disney. And this was the same time period that Second Life and all those things. There are architectural similarities between what we're doing and between things like VR chat or even Roblox, right? They also make use of cloud and streaming and so on. So, yeah, I'm lucky. This is my 5th MMO engine from scratch, right? Yeah. And and not all of them were game, right? MetaPlace was a UGC platform. And so all of those lessons really go into how we architect this and then the game that it enables. Because the tech is not there to be cool tech. The tech is there to enable gameplay that you just can't get any other way.
You named some big things coming or as coming after early access, including, I know you talked about Cornucopia, the planet-eating hive mind, factions and political structures, PvP. Walk me through kind of what the logic is of like what ships first versus what comes later in a game that you're building to evolve, right?
Yep. So what we just announced is early access this summer. We still have a fair amount of stuff to put in the game before that. Yeah. We know that early access has to have, we've got to be at a certain level. So we still have lots of work to do. We're working very hard to get all of that in before we go to open up EA. EA will still very much be early access, right? All the core loop type things should be there. Combat and loot and getting better gear and making your character more powerful and the loops around merchants and item decay and crafting and combat and exploring and mining and all of that kind of stuff needs to be there so that the economy is fully functional and that the different ecosystems and roles are in place. And actually, Cornucopia will be there because that's one of the threats that you fight against. So yeah, that will be there. Okay. If you do get the chance to come check it out soon, you might even get to fight off a spore or two.
That's cool.
But there are things that we expect to continue to add during early access, adding additional profession depth. There's all kinds of nuances and content that we want to keep adding. More monsters, more art, right? Like one of the things about making a game with this much crafting is you got to make art for like a zillion individual little components. So yeah, at early access, I'm sure that there will be icons in the game that have, the name and art pending,
Right.
right?
Gray
Because
boxes
that's some
here
of
and there.
yeah, that's some of what we will flesh
Well,
out.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, the game should be fully playable. It's
That's
just
cool.
we're going to continue to add.
Yeah.
Players will be building buildings. They can govern planets right now. That's been in the game for months and months. So yeah, a lot of the big ambitious things are already there. Space flight you can only do right now in a spacesuit, but we have given players brief tests of the spaceships that are coming. We probably won't launch the full spaceships feature until one of the early updates in EA. But yeah, at the full fruition of this is, EA leads to a 1.0.
Yeah.
So
right.
there is absolutely a gap between the
Yeah.
EA version and the 1.0 version.
Awesome.
But the game should be fully playable, and we're going to let everybody who plays during early access will have access as part of their purchase price to owning land inside the game.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, at 1.0 later, that's going to be something that people will have to pay for.
Sure.
Because, yes, virtual land is infinite, but it turns out that infinite virtual land is very finite, expensive servers that we
There's
have
still
to pay
a cost
for.
to it. Yeah,
there's
a
cost there. So
yeah.
So that's going to be a paid feature eventually. But during early access, if you buy in now, it's in the bundle. You get it for the duration of EA.
And just for the listeners, at the time of this recording, literally the announcement was this morning that the game, the window for early access was going to be this summer. Plus, there's a new trailer, which I highly recommend everybody check out. Super cool. I just wanted to ask you, from a personal level, what does it feel like to put a window on something you've been carrying, legitimately for 3 decades?
Oh.
How are you feeling?
This morning, I was thinking of the, I'm going to mispronounce the Latin, so the alea jacta est, the die is cast. It feels like this is the moment when, this is the moment when you step onto the water slide, or the moment where you step off the platform on your zip line. From here, it just gets speedier and scarier and a little less in your control. But, we still have that whole zipline mile to go, right? So there's a lot to do that we'll be building until that moment when it's actually out there in players' hands. But the other side of it is a lot like urban planning a city. You know that what you're setting up is just the start point.
Yeah, the foundation.
For what you hope are years to come.
Yeah.
And so, it's not that it's a cliche now, right? MMOs are never done, right? But they have to never be done. That's part of what keeps people interested in them, is that sense of ongoing evolution. So, it's almost like you'd never do this if you were running a race, but we're currently sprinting to the start point of the marathon.
Right. just to get to the start.
That's right.
If you maybe one or two more questions. If you had to describe Star Wars Reach in a sentence to someone who's never played like a sandbox MMO, what would that be?
Imagine a game where you can log into this alternate galaxy and be who you want to be. If you want to be that intrepid smuggler type with the beat up cargo spaceship, okay. If you want to be the person who runs the tavern with a bunch of weird people in it, or maybe the one who steps up on stage and plays their instrument, that's available to you also. But crucially, and unlike any other game I think you've played, it's a game where when you go and you touch the world, everything just does what you expect. Dump water on the ground, it gets muddy. Step in the mud, and you might get stuck in it. Even simple things like that. But also cool, complicated things like, wow, during the winter is the only time that the deadly ice snakes tend to come down from the mountains, right? Yeah, it's that when I would ask them, hey, did you ever watch any of those isekai anime, or did you ever, any of those things? Did you ever see a movie where people got sucked into a virtual world? Any of those, right? There's loads of that stuff now. They might not know sandbox MMOs, but all of that media, that is what those are portraying.
Yeah, the promise.
The dream of alternate reality is not kill 10 rats.
Right. Go to the basement. Yeah.
So I would say to them, it's your chance to step into an alternate world where you can be whoever you want to be, where you can do things that you couldn't do, and you can do it with other people.
Brilliant. Okay, I've taken up a lot of your time. I have one last question I want to ask that is not related to Stars Reach, but something that I like to end every episode of the podcast the same way.
Right.
The name of the show is Replay, and so I want to ask you if you could go back and replay one game with the caveat, of experiencing it completely fresh for the very first time. Which game would that be and why?
That's really hard.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'll get into trouble if I rattle off 4 or 5, right?
I mean, you can. There's no. I mean, whatever. You make your own rules. So
okay. Like the game that always comes to mind is Mule, which was a classic 8-bit game it pioneered multiplayer co-op strategy.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, I still go back and replay that game. I almost wore my Mule t-shirt to this interview. I replay it periodically. I make people on my team play it, actually, and it serves as an inspiration for Stars Reach. I would go back and replay Journey. I would go back and re-experience Edith Finch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving through decades here, right? Right. And that first magical moment when I first logged into a mud, where people were talking about, watch out, don't go around that corner. There's mobs over there, and I thought they meant a mob of people. I didn't know the lingo yet. And where I'm moving around this world, and other people are moving around, and then a rabbit crawled out of my backpack and turned into a person, and it was just a mind-blowing experience that we take all of that for granted today. But one of the things I think this is probably true of all of the games I just listed, maybe. Mm-hmm. They were all moments of stepping across a threshold into an alternate world that was, that blew my mind in some way, and that felt magical, and that felt like a possibility space larger than what I expected, given the size of the disc or the screen or the install. To me, that is one of the cardinal virtues of immersive games, is that. And I think we talk a lot about how, it's all old hat these days, everybody's connected. But I try to always remind myself that we are playing with lightning built on top of machines made out of sand, and we're getting magic out of it. And I try to always find ways to see the magic. That to me is what I crave when I come to these games.
Hear, hear. Where can people find more information about Stars Reach, yourself, all of that?
Stars Reach is easy, starsreach.com. There's also a YouTube /Stars Reach, and so on, right? We actually even have a link tree. You could search the Stars Reach link tree. It's off the website, and it'll link you to all the others.
We'll post all that in the show notes as well for people.
I'm also easy to find. My blog, raphkoster.com, has been running since the late 90s. It's accumulated millions of words. There's all kinds of things on there about all of my projects. Whether it's the games I make, the emulators I help maintain, because I do a lot of retro emulation work, or have done, music I create, you name it. All of that stuff is there on the website. There's loads of material to go dig through.
Amazing. And frankly, I say this to a lot of our guests, but I would love it if you would come back, because I really do feel like we only scratched the surface. We didn't even get to talk about emulation. We barely talked about metaverse or
Yep.
all of that other stuff that you've done, in the background, even like design theory. I would love to talk more about that. So, when the time is right and when you have that time, that'd be great.
Let me get through this.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me your time today, given all you
Absolutely.
have going on. I really appreciate it, Raph. And thank you so much.
Yeah, let's book more time as soon as I'm through this announcement.
Let's do it. Yeah, for sure. It's been a pleasure,
I'd
though.
enjoy
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for the time.
And that is Raph Koster, CEO and creative director of Playable Worlds, author of A Theory of Fun, and one of the architects of every online world worth talking about. Links to Star's Reach, his writing, and everything we discussed are in the show notes below. If you wouldn't mind, please follow or subscribe to Replay. It really helps out wherever you listen. I'm Greg Off, and this is Replay.